Hey guys, in this video we'll be talking about the different types of fields that can be used in Django, and we'll do this by creating another model in our application. Obviously, I would not be able to go through every single one of them, but you will get an idea of how to use them. Okay? So going back, the Django ORM is an abstraction layer over SQL, and Django and fields in Django ORM are abstractions over the different types of columns that you have in a relational database. By using these fields, you don't need to worry about how it is stored in the database. All you need to figure out is what general type it is and if it will fit within the constraints of different fields. Additionally, by using the Django ORM, you are provided basic validation for any input to your database. Okay. So let's look at different types of fields Django has. So it has a Boolean field. So the idea with the Boolean field is that it is a true or false. Okay. So in any form that uses a Boolean field, form being in the default admin that I will be discussing in a later video, or in the front end using Django templates, a Boolean field will look like a checkbox. Okay. And by default, Boolean fields would have a value of none if I don't pass in an option or an argument into my call for Boolean field. Okay, so to use it in your models file, okay, let's go to our models file. Lists, models. Okay, so to use a Boolean file, say is active is equal to models dot Boolean field. If I don't add a default to it, Django will set it to none. However, it would be best to add a default, especially if you have an existing application. Okay, you've seen it before wherein you had an application, there were already migrations in it, and then we changed our application because there was an error saying that we needed to add a default option. Okay, so in this case, we already have the text field or the text column, text attribute here. Okay, which means that it's already in the database. There may be data in the database. That's why it's important to put this default here. Okay, or you can set it to default false. Okay, so that's how you use a Boolean field. A character field is similar to is basically a text field but with character limitations. So let's add a title is equal to models dot car field. With a car field, there is one required option, which is the max length. Okay, so we add the max length. Let's say it's 100 characters long. Okay, so that is your character field. It has no default value, but you can give it a default value. I'll try and get this larger so that you can see. Let's add a default. That default can be an empty string, in which case you can also use another option, the blank option, to allow the title to be blank. Okay, Next up, we have a date field. This is used to represent dates. So just the date. So that's the date, month, and year. And it has optional arguments, auto now and auto now add. So what's the difference between the two? Created on, auto now would be equal to modified on, meaning every time you change or every time the instance is saved, modified auto now would change the value of that column. So for example, if I wanted a modified on column, and then I said models dot date field, if I would use the auto now argument to make sure that every time I save this this instance or the instance of this model, this field will update it with the timestamp. Okay, with the modified on, I cannot use the other argument, which auto now add, because that only updates on create. So that is useful for something like a created on models.date field auto now add is equal to true. Okay. The next thing, okay, another field would be the date time field. This is similar to the date field. The only difference is that I will add a time to it. Django will add the time to it. So aside from just the date, month, and year, it will add hours, minutes, and seconds. Or any basically it's the date time representation in Python. Okay, from date time, import date time. Okay, so that is the date representation used. Okay, so if I want this to have a time, so I want to know when exactly it was modified, I could make the date field into a date time field. I could do the same for my created on. Okay. The decimal field is a field that is used to store a fixed precision decimal number. Could be useful for anything that would have a specific number of decimal places. Okay, so for example, let's say with this task, number of hours. Okay, done equal to models dot decimal field, because let's say we want to be able to, half an hour, etc. And we can give it a max length, or there's this field, okay, max digits, So what this gives you is the total number including the decimal places, so whole numbers up to the decimal. So I'm pretty sure a task shouldn't take more than a week. So max digits would be around 4. So that's two decimal places, and the tens place and the ones place. And then decimal places would be 2. So that number representation will look something like 24.05. Okay, so that's your decimal field. Email field is essentially a character field with email validation, so very similar to what we did a while ago with the title. Integer field is for storing integers. A text field we've already used with the item model here. Okay. The last one, which is very important, is the foreign key field. Okay. So it is used for assigning a many-to-one relationship. It takes in two arguments. One is a string representation of the model that you are creating a foreign key for, and then you want to add an onDelete parameter or argument so that Django knows what happens if this instance would have what would happen if this instance was deleted. Okay, so to give you a better idea about that, let's add another class. Okay, so let's say we are tagging our tasks. So why are we tagging our tasks? Let's say we want to organize our tasks. So we're tagging our tasks. So models.model tag name models.car field. Obviously, I don't want it to be a very long name, so I will use a car field, but let's give it around 200 characters. Okay, very long. That's a very long title. That's a very long tag name. You could even limit this to, I know, 100 characters. And then let's create the tagged item. Okay, so this will be a models.foreign key, and then this would be item on delete models.cascade. So that is a way to do that. Let's say I just want to keep my created on here. So go to models.date time field auto now add true modified on auto now is equal to true. Okay, so with that, obviously what I need to do is make my migrations. So again, we are asked for the default because there are existing rows. Okay, so let's do is from datetime, or rather import datetime our default is going to be datetime.now. Okay, let's do that for this one as well. And let's run that again. Oops. Oh, so that's an issue. The auto now add, and default are mutually exclusive, which means I can't add a default. So to update that, let us just choose to let's look at the warnings. List that I have created on fixed default value provided. It seems you set a fixed date value as default. You may not want this. If you want to have the current date as default, use django.utils.timezone.now. So let's do that. Django.utils.timezone.now. Let's copy that. And then from Django.utils import time zone. Okay. Let's delete this. Timezone.now. But it will again get mad at me because I have the default. So pretty useless. So the other option is to provide a one-off default, and the one that we want is timezone.now, so we can accept that. Now we have a migration, so let's just make that migrate, and then our database is done. So I've shown you what the different fields are that's available. Okay. Now let's continue with just looking at the options. Okay. So I've already shown you the options. There are just 4 that I wanted to highlight. You have the default, which I've already shown you. The null option, which is basically checking or telling Django that you are accepting that the field is empty or just a null value. And or you can also use the blank option, or the blank option. So if it is true, the field is allowed to be blank. So in the case of strings, that would be an empty string. Okay, and then there's also the choices option, which takes in a list of Python tuples. So as you can see in the code example here, I have a task categories constant that is a list of tuples. Okay, so the first value is what is going to be stored in the database. The second value is what will be displayed on any UI that Django auto-generates, and it is used like so. Okay. Now, how do you decide if you want to use null or blank? I've added a table in the slides. So for character fields, if you want it to be null, you also need to set it to blank. Also set blank to true. Okay, so that, and then unique to true, so that it could just be null. But if you just want to accept empty strings, you just have to use blank is equal to true. It's not a good idea to do this for Boolean fields. For all the other fields that we have mentioned, okay, you can set null to true if, for example, there is a time where you don't need, it's not really necessary to have a foreign key, but there are instances where you do. You can set null to true. Okay. Foreign key as blank would be an empty string, but a good way to handle this is null is true and then blank is true. Okay. So with that, we end this video. In the next video, I will talk about the Django admin, the default Django admin that is built, that is provided by default by Django. I will show you how to create a user on it, and how to access it in the browser.